An injured bear cub is found surrounded by vultures. When the woman saves him, she realizes that the danger may be greater than it appears. Mysterious sounds from the woods increase the tension at dusk. A simple rescue turns into an unexpected revelation. Rain lashed furiously against the winding road that cut through the Sierra Nevada mountains. Sarah Thompson, a 32-year-old woman with hazel eyes and wavy dark hair, cautiously drove her old Volkswagen Beetle. The raindrops hit the windshield with such force that even the wipers at full speed barely managed to maintain minimal visibility. Sarah had just left Sacramento, where she had attended a conference on environmental conservation. As a biologist specializing in wildlife, these meetings were crucial for her work, but this time, something troubled her beyond the professional realm. During the conference, she had learned about the growing threat faced by black bears in the region due to poaching and habitat loss. This news had awakened painful childhood memories. As she drove, her mind wandered to that fateful summer day 20 years ago when she found her dog, Buddy, lying lifeless in the backyard of her house. The neighbor had thrown rat poison over the fence, not caring about the consequences. The helplessness and pain she felt at that moment never fully left her. Suddenly, a lightning bolt illuminated the sky, followed by a deafening thunder that made Sarah startle. She blinked rapidly, trying to focus on the road. That's when she saw it. A small, dark lump on the edge of the road, surrounded by what appeared to be scavenger birds. Intrigued and concerned, Sarah slowed down and approached cautiously. As she got closer, her heart skipped a beat. There, curled up and shivering, lay a black bear cub, its fur soaked by the rain and its eyes filled with fear. The vultures surrounding it cawed menacingly, as if waiting for the right moment to attack. Without thinking twice, Sarah stopped the car and got out, ignoring the rain that immediately soaked her clothes. She approached cautiously, shooing away the vultures with abrupt movements of her arms. "Shoo, get out of here," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. The vultures temporarily dispersed, allowing Sarah to approach the cub. Upon closer examination, she noticed with horror the deep wounds on its paws, as if it had been desperately struggling to escape from something. "Oh, little one," Sarah murmured, her voice breaking with emotion. "What happened to you?" The bear cub looked at her with eyes full of pain and fear, but also with a glimmer of hope. Sarah felt her heart melt. She couldn't abandon this helpless little being, not after what had happened to Buddy. Carefully, she wrapped the cub in her jacket, ignoring the weak grunts of protest. "It's okay, little one. I'm going to call you Max. Let's get you out of here." As she carried Max to her car, Sarah noticed that the vultures had gathered again, watching her with an unsettling intensity. Their black eyes seemed to follow her every move, as if they knew something she didn't. Back in the car, with Max trembling in the passenger seat, Sarah made a decision that would change the course of her life. She couldn't simply leave the cub anywhere. It needed specialized and urgent care. "I'll take you to the rescue center in Tahoe," she told Max, though she knew the bear cub couldn't understand her. "They'll know what to do." As she turned the key in the ignition, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at stake. The vultures, Max's wounds, the storm. It all seemed too coincidental. What Sarah didn't know was that her decision to rescue Max would trigger a series of events that would test her determination, challenge her beliefs, and lead her to confront not only the forces of nature, but also the darkness that sometimes nests in the human heart. As the Beetle drove away down the winding road, the vultures took flight, following the car like silent shadows in the stormy night. Sarah and Max's adventure was just beginning, and fate had trials in store for them that neither could imagine. The rain had subsided when Sarah reached the outskirts of South Lake Tahoe. The night sky was still covered with threatening clouds, but at least visibility had improved. Max, the little bear cub, lay motionless in the passenger seat, wrapped in Sarah's jacket. Only the slight movement of his chest indicated he was still alive. "Hang in there, little one," Sarah murmured, casting a worried glance at the shivering bundle. "We're almost there." The Tahoe Wildlife Rescue Center was located on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by dense vegetation that separated it from the urban bustle. Sarah had visited the place several times for work, but never at this hour of the night. Upon arrival, she noted with dismay that the lights were off and the main gate locked with a padlock. Undeterred, Sarah rang the bell repeatedly. After what seemed like an eternity, A light came on inside and a sleepy figure emerged from the darkness. "Who is it? What do you want at this hour?" asked a gruff voice from the other side of the gate. "I'm Sarah Thompson, a biologist. I have an emergency," she replied, trying to keep calm. "It's an injured black bear cub. It needs urgent attention." The man, whom Sarah recognized as Jim, the night guard, looked at her suspiciously. "I'm sorry, miss. We can't take in animals at this hour. You'll have to come back tomorrow." "But it can't wait until tomorrow," Sarah exclaimed, desperation tinging her voice. "He's seriously injured. He could die if he doesn't receive immediate attention." Jim seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then shook his head. "I'm sorry. Those are the rules. I can't let anyone in without the director's authorization." Sarah felt frustration and anger growing inside her. "Please, I'm a professional. I work in conservation. I know Dr. Johnson, the chief veterinarian. Can't you call him?" "Dr. Johnson is on vacation," Jim replied, his tone becoming firmer. "And the night staff isn't trained to handle complex cases." "I'm sorry, but you'll have to find another option." Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. How could they deny help to an animal in need? The image of Buddy, her childhood dog dead due to others' negligence, came back to her mind with renewed force. "No," she said finally, her voice loaded with determination. "I'm not going to abandon him. If you can't help, then I'll take care of him myself." Jim looked at her with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Miss, you can't just take a wild animal. It's illegal. And leaving a defenseless cub to die isn't?" Sarah retorted, indignation evident in her tone. "I'll do whatever it takes to save him. If I have to face the authorities later, so be it." Without waiting for a response, Sarah turned around and went back to her car. Carefully, she took Max in her arms and settled him in the back seat. "Come on, little one," she whispered. "Looks like you and I are on our own in this." As she drove away from the rescue center, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mixture of fear and determination. She had no idea how to care for a bear, much less an injured one, but she was determined to try. What Sarah didn't know was that her decision to take Max wouldn't only put her in conflict with the law, but would also introduce her to a world of secrets and dangers she could never have imagined. As she drove back into the city, desperately searching for an open veterinary clinic, she didn't notice the dark car that began to follow her at a prudent distance. Inside, a shadowy figure watched with interest, speaking quietly on a phone. "We have her. She's got the cub with her. We'll proceed as planned." The night was far from over for Sarah and Max, and the challenges they would face in the coming hours would test not only their determination, but also their survival instincts. The city of South Lake Tahoe, normally bustling and full of life, seemed like a silent and gloomy labyrinth in the early hours of the morning. Sarah drove through the streets in desperation, looking for any veterinary clinic that might be open. Little Max whimpered weakly in the back seat, reminding her of the urgency of her mission. After what seemed like an eternity, Sarah spotted a luminous sign. 24-hour veterinary clinic. Dr. Alex Parker. With her heart racing, she parked in front of the modest establishment and ran towards the entrance, carrying Max in her arms. The doorbell rang shrilly in the silence of the night. A young man with a tired look raised his head from behind the counter. "Good evening. How can I help you?" he asked, stifling a yawn. "Please," Sarah panted. "I need to see the doctor immediately. It's an emergency." The young man looked curiously at the bundle in Sarah's arms. "The doctor is attending to another emergency. I can take your details and—" His words were abruptly cut off when Sarah partially unwrapped Max, revealing his black fur and muzzle. The receptionist's eyes widened like saucers. That's a bear, yes," Sarah confirmed firmly. "And he needs urgent help." The young man seemed to hesitate for a moment, but before he could respond, a deep voice resonated from the hallway. "What's going on here, Mike?" A middle-aged man with graying hair and a white coat emerged from one of the examination rooms. His eyes immediately fell on Max. "My God," he muttered, quickly approaching. "Is that what I think it is?" Sarah nodded, desperation evident in her voice. "Doctor, please, I found him on the road. He's injured and needs help." Dr. Parker looked at her intently for a moment, as if assessing the situation. Finally, he nodded. "Follow me," he said, leading her to an examination room. "Mike, make sure no one disturbs us." Once inside, the doctor examined Max carefully and professionally. His expert hands moved over the cub's body, assessing the wounds and his general condition. "He's malnourished and dehydrated," he reported. "The wounds on his paws are deep but don't seem infected. However, I'm concerned about this mark on his head." Sarah leaned in for a closer look. Indeed, there was a strange, almost circular mark, partially hidden by Max's fur. "What do you think it is?" she asked, feeling a knot in her stomach. Dr. Parker frowned. "I'm not sure. It could be the result of an attack, but something doesn't add up." As the doctor began treating Max's wounds, Sarah told him about how she had found him and her failed attempt to take him to the rescue center. "You did the right thing bringing him here," said Dr. Parker, applying an ointment to Max's paws. "But you should know that caring for a wild animal, especially a bear, is illegal without the proper permits." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "I know, but I couldn't let him die. What can I do?" The doctor looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "I have a friend at the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Maybe he can help us get a temporary permit while we find a permanent solution." Suddenly, Mike, the receptionist, burst into the room, his face pale. "Doctor, there's a car parked outside. They've been watching the clinic since the lady arrived." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Had they followed her? Who were they and what did they want? Dr. Parker acted quickly. "Mike, turn off all the front lights. Sarah, you and Max will come with me. I know a safe place where you can stay tonight." As they prepared to leave through the back door of the clinic, Sarah couldn't help but feel that she was being dragged into something much bigger and more dangerous than she had imagined. The mystery surrounding Max was becoming deeper, and she was determined to get to the bottom of it, no matter the cost. What Sarah didn't know was that her decision to save Max had set in motion a series of events that would shake the foundations of her life and lead her to confront forces she never believed possible. As they slipped away into the darkness of the Tahoe night, the mysterious car remained motionless, its occupants hidden behind tinted windows, patiently waiting for their next move. The night enveloped Lake Tahoe like a dark cloak as Dr. Parker's old Jeep wound its way through the sinuous paths leading out of town. Sarah, seated in the passenger seat with Max curled up in her lap, nervously glanced at the rearview mirror, fearing to see the lights of a vehicle following them. "Where are we going, Doctor?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Parker kept his eyes fixed on the road. "To a safe place. An old cabin that belonged to my grandfather. It's secluded and well hidden. You can stay there while we sort out this situation." After nearly an hour of driving on increasingly narrow and bumpy roads, they arrived at a clearing in the forest. The cabin, barely visible among the vegetation, seemed like something out of a dark fairy tale. "Nobody has been here in years," the doctor explained as he opened the creaky door. "But it should be sufficient for now." The interior was austere but cozy. A small living room with a fireplace, a basic kitchen, and 2 bedrooms made up the entire space. Dust and cobwebs were evidence of the long abandonment. "Thank you, Doctor," said Sarah, gently depositing Max on an old sofa. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you for this." Dr. Parker smiled tiredly. "No need. But Sarah, you must understand what you're getting into. Caring for a wild animal is illegal, and there's something strange about all this." Sarah nodded, gently stroking Max. "I know, but I can't abandon him. There's something about him, about how I found him. I feel like this is bigger than just a coincidence." The doctor looked at her intently for a moment before speaking. "Tomorrow I'll contact my friend at the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Meanwhile, stay here and don't go out for any reason. I'll leave you provisions and medications for Max." Before leaving, Dr. Parker handed her an old cell phone. "Use it only in case of emergency. The clinic's number is saved." Once alone, Sarah set about cleaning and arranging the space as best she could. Max, still weak, watched her every move with curious eyes. "Looks like we're going to be quarantine buddies, little one," she told him, flashing a tired smile. As the hours passed, Sarah couldn't help but feel that Max's eyes hid more than they showed. At times, the cub seemed to perfectly understand what she was saying, reacting in ways that went beyond animal instinct. That night, as she tried to fall asleep in the old cabin bed, Sarah heard a noise coming from the living room. Getting up silently, she found Max standing in front of the window, growling softly. "What's wrong, buddy?" she whispered, approaching. That's when she saw it, a shadow moving among the trees, too large to be a common forest animal. Sarah's heart began to race. Had they been followed here? Suddenly, Max emitted a strange sound, almost like a word. Sarah looked at him in surprise, convinced that her tired mind was playing tricks on her. But the cub's gaze was intense, as if he were trying to communicate something crucial. The sound of a branch breaking outside broke the moment. Sarah, acting on instinct, turned off all the lights and huddled in a corner with Max, holding her breath. Minutes that seemed like hours passed in complete silence. Finally, the sound of footsteps moving away gave them a respite. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. As the night wore on, Sarah couldn't help but think about the series of events that had led her to this moment. What secrets did Max hold? Who were the people who seemed to be after them? And most importantly, what had she really gotten herself into? What Sarah didn't know was that the answers to these questions would lead her to discover a truth that would change not only her life, but potentially the fate of the entire region. As dawn approached, Sarah made a silent promise. She would protect Max at all costs and uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous the path ahead might be. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the dusty windows of the cabin when Sarah woke up with a start. It took her a few seconds to remember where she was and why. Max slept peacefully beside her, his breathing now more stable than the night before. Careful not to wake the cub, Sarah got up and approached the window. The forest seemed calm, with no signs of the mysterious presence that had stalked them during the night. However, a feeling of uneasiness persisted within her. The sound of an approaching vehicle put her on alert. She peeked out cautiously and felt immediate relief upon recognizing Dr. Parker's Jeep. The veterinarian got out of the vehicle carrying several bags and a worried expression on his face. "Good morning, Sarah," he greeted as he entered. "How did you spend the night?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before answering. "Doctor, I think someone was prowling around last night." Dr. Parker frowned. "I was afraid this might happen. Sarah, there's something you need to know." They sat down in the small living room as the doctor pulled some documents from his briefcase. "I've been investigating. The mark on Max's head. It's not natural or accidental." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" "It's an identification mark," the doctor explained, showing her some photographs. "It's used in certain unethical scientific experiments." The images showed other animals with similar marks, all in deplorable conditions. Sarah felt her stomach churn. "Are you saying Max is part of some kind of illegal experiment?" Dr. Parker nodded gravely. "I'm afraid so, and from what I've been able to find out, it's not just any experiment. It's rumored that a group of renegade scientists is working on something big, something involving genetic manipulation of endangered species." Sarah looked at Max, who was now awake and watching them with an intelligence that seemed out of place in such a young bear. "Is that why he seemed to understand me last night? Are they trying to make them smarter?" "It's possible," the doctor replied, "but I'm afraid their goals may be much more sinister. If they manage to control the evolution of key species, they could alter entire ecosystems." Sarah's mind was spinning, trying to process all this information. "But who are they, and why here in Tahoe?" "I don't know for certain," Dr. Parker admitted, "but I have a contact who might be able to help us. He's an ex-agent from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. If anyone can get to the bottom of this, it's him." At that moment, Max approached Sarah and rested his head on her lap, as if understanding the gravity of the situation and wanting to comfort her. She gently stroked him, noticing for the first time small, almost imperceptible scars on his body. "What did they do to you, little one?" she whispered, feeling a mixture of compassion and determination growing within her. Dr. Parker observed them for a moment before speaking. "Sarah, I'll understand if you want to back out. This is bigger and more dangerous than we imagined." Sarah looked at the doctor, then at Max, and finally at the photographs on the table. Her expression hardened with resolution. "No, doctor, I can't abandon Max now. If what you're saying is true, this goes beyond saving an animal. We could be facing an unprecedented ecological threat." The veterinarian nodded, a mixture of admiration and concern on his face. "All right, in that case, we need to move fast. My contact is expecting us in the city this afternoon, but we must be extremely careful. They're probably already on our trail." As they prepared to leave, Sarah couldn't help but feel that she was about to cross a point of no return. The biologist who had come to Tahoe for a simple conference was becoming something more, a protector, an investigator, and possibly the only hope for Max and who knows how many other animals. What Sarah didn't know was that her decision to move forward would lead her to confront not only unscrupulous scientists, but also powerful interests that would stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden. As the jeep pulled away from the cabin, venturing into the dense Tahoe forest, a shadowy figure emerged from among the trees, observing their departure. With a quick movement, he pulled out a phone and dialed a number. "The targets are on the move. Looks like the vet is involved. Proceed as planned?" The answer was brief and decisive. "Follow them, but don't intervene yet. We want to know who else is involved before we act." Sarah and Max's adventure was just beginning, and the fate of much more than their lives hung in the balance. The roar of helicopters intensified as Sarah, Dr. Parker, and Max huddled in the small clearing. Time was running out, but something in the cub's gaze told them this was crucial. "They look like coordinates," muttered Dr. Parker, adjusting his glasses. Sarah quickly pulled out the GPS device Dr. Parker had given her. "You're right. These coordinates point to a location about 12 miles from here, deep in the forest." Sarah looked at Max, whose eyes shone with a mixture of intelligence and urgency. "He wants us to go there. It must be important." The sound of breaking branches and approaching voices put them on alert. Dr. Parker made a quick decision. "I'll distract them," he said, checking his phone. "You go to those coordinates. Whatever it is, it could be our only hope." "But Dr. Parker," Sarah began, but he interrupted her. "There's no time to argue. Go." With a heavy heart, Sarah and Max plunged into the thick of the forest, guided by the GPS and Max's intuition. Behind them, they heard shouts and the sound of pursuit, signs that Dr. Parker was keeping his promise to buy them time. The following hours were a race against time and nature. The dense vegetation, the suffocating heat, and the constant fear of being discovered tested their physical and mental limits. Max, however, seemed tireless, guiding them with an almost superhuman determination. As the sun began to set, they finally reached a hidden clearing. In the center, partially covered by vegetation, stood an ancient structure reminiscent of Native American architecture, but with elements that didn't fit any known design. "Incredible," Sarah whispered, amazed. "This doesn't appear in any archaeological record." Max moved forward, heading towards what appeared to be the entrance to the temple. Sarah followed, her steps echoing in the supernatural silence of the place. The interior was illuminated by a faint greenish light emanating from the walls. Symbols and hieroglyphs covered every surface, mixing elements from various ancient cultures with what appeared to be modern mathematical formulas and genetic diagrams. "This is impossible," Sarah murmured, touching the inscriptions. "It's as if someone had combined ancient knowledge with cutting-edge science." Max led her to a central chamber where a pedestal rose in the center. On it, a bright crystal pulsed with energy. Without hesitation, Max approached the crystal and touched it with his paw. Instantly, a blinding light flooded the chamber. When Sarah could open her eyes, she gasped. In front of her was no longer the small bear cub, but a humanoid figure, tall and majestic, with features that blended human and animal. "Thank you for bringing me here." The creature spoke with a voice that resonated with ancient wisdom. "My name is Coda, and I am the last guardian of the Life Weavers." Over the next hour, Coda revealed a truth that defied all understanding. The Life Weavers were an ancient order that had guided the evolution of life on Earth for millennia, seeking perfect balance among all species. The Genesis Project was nothing more than a corrupt attempt by some humans to access that sacred knowledge. "You have shown compassion, courage, and respect for life," said Coda. "It is time for humanity to know the truth and assume responsibility for its role in the great tapestry of existence." With a gesture, Coda activated a hidden mechanism. The temple walls began to glow, projecting images and knowledge directly into Sarah's mind. At that moment, helicopters flew over the clearing and voices approached the temple. But it was too late to stop the inevitable. A wave of energy emanated from the temple, spreading across the earth. In every corner of the planet, humans and animals experienced a simultaneous revelation, the truth about their connection, their shared history, and their intertwined future. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, understood that her encounter with Max had not been coincidence. It had been the catalyst for the next great leap in the evolution of planetary consciousness. As the first rays of dawn filtered into the temple, Sarah and Coda emerged to face the world, no longer as fugitives, but as heralds of a new era of understanding and cooperation among all forms of life. In the weeks and months that followed, society experienced profound changes. The Genesis Project was exposed and dismantled. New laws and ethics emerged, based on respect for all forms of life. Science and spirituality found common ground, working together to heal the planet. Sarah, now recognized as a leader in this new world, often reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with the rescue of a small bear cub on a Tahoe highway. It had been a path full of dangers, revelations, and transformations, but one that had ultimately led humanity towards a brighter and more harmonious future. As she watched Coda interact with a group of children, teaching them the secrets of communication with nature, Sarah smiled. The world had changed, and with it the destiny of all creatures that inhabited it. The adventure wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. But now, for the first time in history, all species on Earth were moving forward together towards a shared future, intertwined in the great tapestry of life. As the dust settled on the monumental revelations, Sarah found herself at the center of a rapidly changing world. The days following the activation of the temple were a whirlwind of activity, with governments, scientists, and ordinary citizens grappling with the new reality that had been unveiled. Sarah, along with Coda, became key figures in bridging the gap between humanity and the rest of the natural world. Their story, from the rescue of a bear cub to the discovery of an ancient order of lifeweavers, captivated the global imagination and became a catalyst for change. Dr. Parker, who had risked everything to help them, was hailed as a hero. His clinic became a hub for a new kind of veterinary science, one that incorporated the ancient wisdom of the lifeweavers with modern medical practices. Together with Sarah, he spearheaded efforts to develop new ethical ways of communicating with and caring for animals. As weeks turned into months, the world began to transform in ways that would have seemed impossible before. Cities redesigned themselves to coexist more harmoniously with nature. Wildlife corridors sprang up, connecting fragmented habitats. The line between urban and wild began to blur as animals and humans learned to share spaces in new and innovative ways. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah stood on the balcony of a newly established Lifeweaver Research Center overlooking Lake Tahoe. The lake sparkled in the early light, and she could see various species, deer, bears, and even a family of wolves, moving freely along the shoreline, coexisting peacefully with human beachgoers. Coda joined her, his presence still awe-inspiring despite the months they had spent working together. "You're thinking about how it all began, aren't you?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate with the very earth beneath them. Sarah nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's hard not to. Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed in such a short time." Coda's eyes, filled with ancient wisdom, gazed out over the landscape. "Change was always inevitable, Sarah. The question was whether it would come through destruction or harmony. Thanks to you, we chose harmony." As they stood there, a group of children approached, led by a teacher. It was one of the new educational programs designed to teach the younger generation about their connection to the natural world. Sarah watched as Coda knelt down, shifting his form slightly to appear less intimidating to the wide-eyed kids. "Welcome, young ones," he said warmly. "Are you ready to learn the language of the trees today?" The children's excited chatter brought a warmth to Sarah's heart. This was the future they had fought for, a world where the next generation would grow up understanding their place in the great web of life. As the lesson began, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Dr. Parker. "Urgent news. Come to the clinic when you can." Intrigued and slightly concerned, Sarah excused herself and headed to her electric car, one of the many new eco-friendly technologies that had been rapidly developed and adopted in the wake of the global awakening. At the clinic, she found Dr. Parker poring over some data on a holographic display. His face was a mixture of excitement and worry. "Sarah, good you're here," he said as she entered. "We've detected something unusual." He pulled up a map that showed energy readings from around the globe. Most areas pulsed with a steady green glow, the new normal since the activation of the Lifeweaver knowledge. But there was a spot, deep in the Amazon rainforest, that flickered an angry red. "What am I looking at?" Sarah asked, leaning in for a closer look. Dr. Parker's voice was grim. "We think it's another temple, similar to the one you and Coda activated. But something's wrong. The energy signatures are corrupted somehow. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Could it be remnants of the Genesis project? Possibly. Dr. Parker nodded. Or something worse. We've picked up chatter suggesting that not everyone is happy with the new world order. There are those who see our connection with nature as a threat to human dominance. The implications were clear. Despite all the progress they had made, there were still those who clung to the old ways, who saw the world in terms of conquest rather than coexistence. We need to investigate, Sarah said firmly. If there's another temple out there, we can't risk it falling into the wrong hands. Dr. Parker agreed. I've already contacted some of our international partners. We're putting together a team. But Sarah, this could be dangerous. The Amazon is vast, and whoever is behind this won't give up easily. Sarah thought of Max, or Coda, as she now knew him, and the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought of the children learning to speak with trees, and the peaceful coexistence she had witnessed at the lake that morning. I'll do it, she said, her voice filled with determination. Whatever it takes to protect what we've built. As she left the clinic to prepare for the new mission, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. The world had changed dramatically, but there were still battles to be fought, mysteries to be unraveled. The adventure that had begun on a stormy night in the Sierra Nevada was far from over. In fact, it seemed that a new chapter was just beginning, one that would take Sarah and her allies to the heart of the Amazon, facing unknown dangers and potentially uncovering secrets that could once again reshape their understanding of life on Earth. As she drove back to the research center to inform Coda, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. The fate of this new, harmonious world rested in their hands, and she was ready to face whatever came next, for the sake of all life on Earth. The journey to the Amazon was a stark reminder of how much the world had changed in such a short time. Sarah, Coda, Dr. Parker, and a small team of international experts traveled on a state-of-the-art airship, designed to minimize environmental impact. As they soared over the vast expanse of green below, Sarah marveled at how the rainforest had begun to recover in areas once ravaged by deforestation. Their base of operations was a small research station on the outskirts of Manaus, Brazil. The city itself had transformed, with living buildings covered in vertical gardens and streets shared equally between humans and local wildlife. However, the team could sense an undercurrent of tension beneath the surface of this apparent harmony. Dr. Lucia Santos, a Brazilian biologist and their local contact, greeted them as they disembarked. Her face was etched with worry. "We're glad you're here," she said, ushering them into a secure briefing room. "The situation is more complex than we initially thought." Once inside, Dr. Santos pulled up a holographic map of the region. Red markers pulsed at various points throughout the Amazon. "These are the locations where we've detected anomalous energy readings," she explained. "But here's the troubling part. They're moving." Sarah exchanged a concerned glance with Coda. "Moving? How is that possible?" Coda's brow furrowed, his eyes scanning the map intently. The temples of the Life Weavers were never meant to be mobile. This is unnatural. Dr. Parker leaned in, adjusting his glasses. Could it be some kind of technological interference? Perhaps a way to mask the true location? Dr. Santos shook her head. "We considered that, but the energy signatures are too similar to what you described from the Tahoe Temple. Whatever this is, it's utilizing Life Weaver technology, but in a way we've never seen before." As the team discussed potential strategies, a commotion outside caught their attention. Through the windows, they could see a crowd gathering in the street, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. In the sky above, strange, shimmering patterns were forming, like the northern lights, but in vivid, unnatural colors. "It's happening more frequently," Dr. Santos explained as they watched. "These atmospheric disturbances, they seem to correlate with the energy spikes from the anomalous readings." Coda's expression grew grave. "This is worse than I feared. Someone isn't just using Life Weaver technology, they're trying to manipulate the very fabric of life itself." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean, Coda?" The ancient guardian turned to face the group, his eyes reflecting a depth of concern that made Sarah's heart race. The Life Weaver's purpose was to guide and nurture the natural evolution of life on Earth. But this is an attempt to force change, to bend the will of nature to someone's desires. Dr. Parker's voice was grim. "And I think I might know who's behind it." He pulled up a series of documents on his tablet. "Remember the Genesis project? We thought we'd shut it down, but look at this." The screen displayed financial records and encrypted communications. Some of the key players went off the grid right after our discovery in Tahoe. They've been funneling resources into shell companies, all converging here in the Amazon. Sarah's mind raced, connecting the dots. They're trying to regain control, to reshape the world back to how it was, or maybe into something even worse. Coda nodded solemnly. "And they're using corrupted Lifeweaver knowledge to do it. If they succeed, the balance we've achieved could be irreparably destroyed." The gravity of the situation settled over the room like a heavy cloud. They had thought their greatest challenges were behind them, that the world was on a path to harmony. Now, it seemed, they were facing a threat that could unravel everything they had worked for. Dr. Santos broke the tense silence. "We need to move quickly. My team has narrowed down the most likely location for their base of operations. It's deep in the rainforest, in an area that's been experiencing the most frequent and intense energy fluctuations." Sarah straightened, a familiar determination settling over her. "Then that's where we're going. We stopped them once, we can do it again." Coda placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch a reminder of the incredible journey they had already shared. "It won't be easy, Sarah. We're not just facing humans this time, but corrupted ancient power. The very forces of nature may be turned against us." Sarah met his gaze, her resolve unwavering. "I know. But we have something they don't. A true understanding of the balance between all living things. And we have you, Coda." As the team began to prepare for their expedition into the heart of the Amazon, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would test them in ways they couldn't imagine. The lush rainforest, once a symbol of life's resilience, now held secrets and dangers that could reshape the very future of the planet. Outside, the strange lights in the sky pulsed and swirled, a haunting reminder of the unnatural forces they were up against. As Sarah watched, a flock of brightly colored macaws flew past, their cries seeming almost mournful in the eerie glow. This was more than just a mission to stop a group of rogue scientists. It was a battle for the soul of the Earth itself, for the delicate balance that allowed all life to thrive. And as the team geared up, checking equipment and studying maps, Sarah knew that failure was not an option. The fate of the new world they had helped create hung in the balance, and the true test of their resolve was about to begin. As dawn broke over the Amazon, Sarah, Coda, Dr. Parker, and Dr. Santos set out on their expedition. They traveled in a specially designed hovercraft that glided silently over the dense canopy, its eco-friendly technology allowing them to move swiftly without disturbing the forest below. The team's mood was tense, each member acutely aware of the high stakes of their mission. As they journeyed deeper into the heart of the rainforest, the lush greenery gave way to areas where the vegetation seemed off. Trees twisted in unnatural shapes, flowers bloomed in impossible colors, and the very air seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy. "The corruption is spreading," Coda said grimly, his eyes scanning the landscape. "We must hurry." As they approached the coordinates of the suspected base, their instruments began to malfunction. Static crackled through their communication devices, and the hovercraft's navigation system flickered erratically. "We're getting close," Dr. Santos announced, her voice tight with tension. "These readings are off the charts." Suddenly, a massive energy surge rocked the hovercraft, sending it spiraling towards the canopy below. Sarah gripped her seat, her heart pounding, as Dr. Parker fought to regain control of the vehicle. With a sickening crunch, they crash-landed in a small clearing. As the team stumbled out of the damaged hovercraft, they found themselves in a nightmarish version of the rainforest. Plants pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence, and strange hybrid creatures skittered through the underbrush, defying any known classification. "My God," Dr. Parker whispered, his face pale. "What have they done?" Before anyone could respond, a piercing shriek filled the air. Through the twisted foliage, they saw a massive bird-like creature approaching, but it was like no bird they had ever seen. Its feathers seemed to shift and change color, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural intelligence. "Run!" Coda shouted, pushing the team towards a narrow path. They sprinted through the warped jungle, the monstrous bird in hot pursuit. As they ran, Sarah noticed that some plants seemed to reach out for them, their vines whipping through the air like tentacles. Just as it seemed the creature would overtake them, they burst into another clearing and stopped dead in their tracks. Before them stood a structure that defied description. It was part ancient temple, part futuristic laboratory, its surfaces crawling with the same shifting patterns they had seen in the sky over Manaus. "The corrupted temple," Coda breathed, his voice a mixture of awe and horror. As they stood transfixed, a figure emerged from the structure. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized him. Dr. Marcus Blackwood, one of the lead scientists from the original Genesis project. "Ah, our guests have arrived," Blackwood said, his voice unnaturally smooth. "Welcome to the future of evolution." Sarah stepped forward, her fists clenched. "What have you done, Blackwood? This isn't evolution, it's an abomination." Blackwood's smile was cold. "Oh, Sarah, always so short-sighted. We're not destroying nature, we're perfecting it. Imagine a world where we can shape life to our will, where every creature, every plant serves a purpose we define." "That's not your decision to make," Coda growled, his form shifting slightly as he prepared for a potential fight. "Isn't it?" Blackwood countered. "You life weavers had your chance. You let the world fall into chaos, let humanity destroy itself. We're taking control now." As he spoke, more hybrid creatures emerged from the jungle, surrounding the team. Sarah could see the pain and confusion in their eyes. These were beings trapped between worlds, their very existence a violation of natural law. Dr. Santos, who had been scanning the area with a device, suddenly gasped. "The energy readings, they're off the scale. If this continues, the corruption could spread across the entire Amazon, maybe even the world." Blackwood spread his arms wide. "Precisely. And from this new world, we'll rise as gods, shaping life as we see fit." Sarah's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing technology they barely understood. But as she looked at the suffering creatures around them, at the twisted parody of nature Blackwood had created, she knew they couldn't give up. "Coda," she whispered. "The temple. If it's anything like the one in Tahoe, there must be a central power source. If we can reach it..." Coda nodded subtly, understanding her plan. "It's our only chance. But we'll need a distraction." Dr. Parker, overhearing, stepped forward. "Leave that to me," he said, pulling out a small device from his pack. "When I give the signal, run for the temple." Before Sarah could protest, Dr. Parker activated the device. A high-pitched whine filled the air, causing the hybrid creatures to writhe in confusion. In the chaos that followed, Sarah, Coda, and Dr. Santos sprinted towards the corrupted temple. As they reached the entrance, Sarah turned back. Her heart clenched as she saw Dr. Parker being overwhelmed by Blackwood's creations. But there was no time for hesitation. The fate of the world hung in the balance. Inside the temple, they faced a maze of corridors pulsing with the same unnatural energy that permeated the forest outside. As they navigated the twisting passages, each step brought them closer to the heart of the corruption, and potentially to the key to stopping it. But time was running out. Behind them, they could hear Blackwood and his minions in pursuit. Ahead lay unknown dangers and a confrontation that would determine the future of life on Earth. Sarah steeled herself for what was to come. This was the moment everything had been leading to. The true test of whether humanity could find balance with nature, or if the world would fall into an abyss of unnatural evolution. With Coda at her side and Dr. Santos bringing up the rear, Sarah pressed forward into the pulsing heart of the corrupted temple, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them in their final push to save the world they had worked so hard to create. As Sarah, Coda, and Dr. Santos delved deeper into the corrupted temple, the atmosphere grew increasingly surreal. The walls seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and strange organic-looking circuitry snaked along the corridors. The air was thick with an acrid metallic scent that made breathing difficult. "We're getting close to the core," Coda said, his voice strained. "I can feel the corrupted Lifeweaver energy growing stronger." They rounded a corner and found themselves in a vast chamber. At its center stood a massive crystal, similar to the one in the Tahoe temple but warped and discolored. Tendrils of dark energy writhed around it, connecting to various machinery and containment units filled with mutated flora and fauna. "This is it," Dr. Santos whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and scientific fascination. The source of the corruption. Before they could approach, a voice rang out behind them. "I must admit, I'm impressed you made it this far." They turned to see Dr. Blackwood entering the chamber, flanked by several of his hybrid creations. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and his skin seemed to shimmer with the same energy that permeated the temple. "It's over, Blackwood," Sarah said, her voice firm despite the fear coursing through her. "We're shutting this down." Blackwood laughed, a sound that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "Oh, but it's only beginning. Don't you see? We're on the cusp of a new era. With this power, we can reshape life itself, create a perfect world." "Perfect for whom?" Coda challenged, stepping forward. "You're destroying the natural balance, causing untold suffering to countless creatures." "Balance?" Blackwood scoffed. "Nature is cruel, inefficient. We're improving upon it, creating life that serves a purpose, that's resistant to disease and environmental changes." As they argued, Sarah noticed something. The hybrid creatures, despite their fearsome appearance, seemed to be in pain. Their movements were erratic, and their eyes held a deep sadness. An idea formed in her mind. She turned to Coda and whispered, "Can you communicate with them? They're still part of nature, aren't they?" Coda's eyes widened in understanding. He closed his eyes, concentrating deeply. A low, resonant hum began to emanate from him, a sound that seemed to touch something primal in Sarah's core. The effect on the hybrid creatures was immediate. They began to whine and whimper, turning away from Blackwood and towards Coda. "What are you doing?" Blackwood demanded, his composure slipping. "Stop that at once." But Coda's influence was spreading. Throughout the temple, they could hear the cries and roars of other creatures responding to his call. Sarah seized the moment. She sprinted towards the central crystal, dodging Blackwood's grasp. Dr. Santos was right behind her, pulling out a device they had prepared for this moment, a neutralizer designed to counteract the corrupted energy. "No!" Blackwood screamed, lunging towards them. But he was tackled by one of his own creations, a large feline-like beast that now saw him as the threat. Sarah reached the crystal and planted the neutralizer at its base. The device hummed to life, emitting a pulse of pure, uncorrupted, life-weaver energy. The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. The dark tendrils surrounding the crystal began to dissipate. Throughout the temple, they could hear the sounds of machinery shutting down and containment units opening. Blackwood, struggling against his rebellious creations, let out a howl of rage and despair. "You fools! You're destroying years of work, the key to our survival." But Sarah stood firm. "No, we're saving it. Life isn't meant to be controlled or perfected. Its beauty lies in its diversity, its ability to adapt and evolve naturally." As the corrupted energy faded, the hybrid creatures began to change. Some reverted to their original forms, while others settled into new but more natural states. The pain in their eyes gave way to confusion, then relief. Coda approached the crystal, placing his hand upon it. A surge of pure energy flowed through him and out into the temple and beyond. "I'm restoring the balance," he said, his voice resonating with power. "It will take time, but the corruption will be cleansed." Dr. Santos, monitoring the situation on her devices, nodded in agreement. "The energy readings are stabilizing. The effect is spreading beyond the temple, healing the forest." As the chaos subsided, they heard footsteps approaching. To their relief, it was Dr. Parker, battered but alive, leading a group of local authorities and international peacekeepers. "Looks like I missed the main event," Dr. Parker quipped, though his eyes shone with pride as he surveyed the scene. In the days that followed, the true scope of what they had accomplished became clear. The corrupted Lifeweaver energy was receding not just from the Amazon, but from pockets all around the world where Blackwood and his collaborators had been working in secret. The process of healing and reintegration would be long and complex. Many of the hybrid creatures, unable to fully revert to their original forms, would need special care and new habitats. The scientific community was abuzz with the ethical implications and the new understanding of life's malleability. As for Blackwood and his team, they faced justice not just from human laws, but from a new global council that included representatives from the animal kingdom, with Coda serving as a bridge between species. Standing on the balcony of their research center back in Tahoe, Sarah watched the sunset with a new appreciation for the world's natural beauty. Coda joined her, his presence a comforting reminder of all they had been through. "We did it," Sarah said softly. "We saved the world." Coda smiled, a rare expression that lit up his features. "We did more than that, Sarah. We proved that humanity is capable of choosing harmony over dominance, of working with nature instead of against it." As they stood there, a group of children passed by below, laughing as they communicated with a family of deer using the techniques Coda had taught them. It was a small moment, but it represented everything they had fought for, a world where all life coexisted in balance and mutual understanding. The adventure that had begun with the rescue of a bear cub on a stormy night had led to the reshaping of humanity's relationship with the natural world. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt, but Sarah felt ready to face them. With Coda by her side and a growing global community committed to preserving the balance of life, the future looked brighter than ever. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues, Sarah realized that this wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. The true adventure of living in harmony with all of Earth's creatures was just starting, and she couldn't wait to see where it would lead. In the months that followed the Amazon incident, the world continued to adapt to its new reality. Sarah, Coda, and their team found themselves at the forefront of a global movement, working tirelessly to integrate the lessons learned from the life weavers into everyday life. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah stood before a packed auditorium at the United Nations headquarters in New York City. The room was filled with world leaders, scientists, and representatives from various species, a sight that would have been unimaginable just a year ago. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all kinds," Sarah began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "we stand at a crossroads in Earth's history. The events in the Amazon have shown us both the incredible potential and the grave dangers of manipulating the fabric of life itself." As she spoke, holographic images appeared behind her, showcasing the restoration efforts in the Amazon and the integration of hybrid creatures into new ecosystems. "Our task now is not to control or perfect nature, but to understand our place within it. The Life Weaver's knowledge offers us a chance to heal the damage we've done and to forge a new path forward, one of cooperation, not domination." The audience listened intently, many nodding in agreement. Among them, Sarah spotted Dr. Parker, who gave her an encouraging smile. After her speech, Sarah was approached by a group of young activists, their eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Dr. Thompson," one of them said, "we've been inspired by your work. We want to start a global youth movement for interspecies cooperation. Would you support us?" Sarah felt a surge of hope. "Absolutely. In fact, I think I know just the person to help you get started." Over the next few weeks, Sarah watched with pride as Coda worked with the youth group, teaching them advanced communication techniques and the principles of the Life Weavers. The movement spread rapidly, with chapters popping up in cities and rural areas alike. Meanwhile, Dr. Santos led a team of scientists in developing new technologies based on the uncorrupted Life Weaver energy. They created sustainable power sources, advanced healing techniques, and methods for restoring damaged ecosystems at an unprecedented rate. But not everything was smooth sailing. In some parts of the world, there was resistance to the changes. People feared the unknown, and some saw the integration of animal consciousness into human society as a threat. One evening, as Sarah was reviewing reports of anti-integration protests, Coda entered her office, his expression grave. "We have a situation," he said. "There's a group in Eastern Europe claiming to have recovered some of Blackwood's research. They're threatening to create their own corrupted Life Weaver technology." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "We need to act fast. Can you contact our team?" Within hours, Sarah, Coda, and a specially trained task force were on their way to a remote location in the Carpathian Mountains. As their aircraft approached, they could see an ominous green glow emanating from a hidden valley. "It's déjà vu all over again," Dr. Parker muttered as they prepared to land. But this time they were better prepared. Using the knowledge gained from their Amazon experience, the team was able to neutralize the corrupted energy before it could spread. The rogue scientists were apprehended, and their research was secured for proper study and containment. As they flew back home, Sarah realized that this would likely be their new normal. Not just scientists, but guardians of the delicate balance between progress and preservation. Months turned into years, and the world continued to change in ways both big and small. Cities were redesigned to accommodate the needs of various species. Schools introduced curricula that included interspecies communication and ecosystem management. The line between human and animal became increasingly blurred as mutual understanding grew. 5 years after the events in the Amazon, Sarah found herself back at Lake Tahoe, standing on the same spot where she had first encountered Max, the bear cub who turned out to be so much more. The lake was as beautiful as ever, but now it teemed with a diversity of life that coexisted in harmony. Fish leaped from the water, communicating with birds overhead. A family of deer grazed peacefully near a group of human picnickers, each respecting the other's space. Coda appeared beside her, his form shifting slightly to match the serene mood of the setting. "Thinking about how it all began?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded, a smile playing on her lips. "It's amazing how far we've come, and yet, in some ways, we're just getting started." Coda's eyes twinkled with ancient wisdom and newfound hope. "The journey of life is never-ending, Sarah. But now, for the first time in eons, all of Earth's children are walking that path together." As they stood there watching the sun set over the lake, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. The world wasn't perfect. There were still challenges to face, balances to maintain, and new threats that would undoubtedly arise. But she knew that whatever came next, they would face it united. Humans, animals, and all forms of life, working together to protect and nurture the magnificent tapestry of existence. The adventure that had begun on a stormy night with a small bear cub had blossomed into a global awakening. And as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, Sarah knew that the greatest chapters of Earth's story were yet to be written.